Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World. We're back after our summer break with the best possible news and interviews and analysis of world events. This week I'll be talking about Pakistan to former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, to top pollster Frank Luntz about the race for the US presidency, and to the anti-globalization movement's favourite author, Naomi Klein. But we begin with Iraq. This week, the US Congress heard an optimistic message from General David Petraeus, who insists that the so-called surge is bringing results in a prime-time television address, in fact. Just last night, President George Bush announced plans for a partial troop withdrawal from Iraq by next summer. So, what does all that mean for Iraq? Well, I'm joined by General Sir Mike Jackson, who was head of the NATO peacekeeping force in Bosnia and stepped down as head of the British Corps last year. He has recently written his autobiography, right here, with a magnificent picture of him there on the front there. And he's in the bestseller list already too. Tells about the whole 45 years of his career, from the troubles in Ireland to commanding NATO troops in Kosovo and deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. But just starting with Mike, welcome, first of all.
Thank you, David.
Starting this stroll through your life with today and the news today, in the book you talk reflectively about Iraq and so on. The message that's coming through, the optimism of David Petraeus, the non-optimism of the Democrats and some of the Republicans, and too little too late and so on. Do you think it's possible, Ryan Crocker said it's possible that we can succeed in Iraq? Can we?
I don't discount that as still being possible. You said David Petraeus was optimistic. Yes, I understand, but I also believe him, and I know him quite well, and I'm a great admirer of his, that he would say nothing which he didn't believe to be right and true. So realism as well as optimism there. And we all heard what he said, and indeed the President appears to have largely followed the recommendations which General Petraeus put before him.
But it's difficult. It's a balance, isn't it, here?
Yes.
We've had the surge coming in of 30,000, and now we may have 30,000 coming out, and so on. But I mean, are we making progress? I mean, do you think David Petraeus' basic message was that the surge is working, or?
Yes, I mean, I think he went through it quite carefully, yes, and he differentiated geographically where that was appropriate. And you're right, David, of course. You know, those additional 30-odd thousand American soldiers which went in will come out. But during that time, we heard David Petraeus talk about the progress on the ground in security terms, and he produced some statistics to support that. But I note he also mentioned, rightly, that there has to be, in parallel, political progress alongside that security progress. You know, the Iraqi government has been urged for some time to take perhaps a wider view in terms of its approach to all Iraqis, all sects, all parts of Iraqi society, and I hope they will do that. Very important.
And in terms of the approach, in fact, Donald Rumsfeld said just recently that he blamed the Iraqi politicians and so on for there not being greater progress. Equally, there are politicians in America who are blamed for lack of progress. I mean, do you think the politicians have performed as well as the soldiers?
I'm afraid I don't. No, when you put it as starkly as that, I mean, I've been hugely impressed by the American Army's commitment, courage, and willingness to sacrifice on behalf of a future better Iraq. That is quite an undertaking indeed, and they have, I think, done magnificently. Whether we quite had the same degree of political commitment to push on, you know, whatever the difficulties, but to move Iraq forward to a better future for all Iraqis, That's where we must be.
That's where it needs to be. And as you look at it, you comment in the book on what happened after the actual war was fought, and the lack of numbers, and how before the war was fought the Americans wanted 400,000 troops, and Rumsfeld wanted 60,000 troops, and so on. Was the lack of numbers a mistake in the war bit, or only in the after-war bit?
In the after-war bit, David. The actual process of the maneuver war, force on force. Somebody asked me, I remember, I think I referred in the book that it would take 2 weeks. I was wrong. It took nearly 3, but that's not the point. The point is that that's what the American army does best, and does it extremely professionally. No, there was never any question that the coalition would not be able to defeat Saddam Hussein's forces. That was, in a way, the opening, though. This was not the whole story by far. What is the end state? A stable Iraq, at peace with itself, at peace with its neighbours, with the economy moving on. Easy to say, complex and difficult to achieve. And so it was in that period from the fall of Saddam Hussein onwards that I think we could have all done a bit better than we did, and perhaps a lot better.
And that would have brought more people in and given the new peaceful Iraq a chance.
I mean, they're just, as I say in the book, and I think many other commentators have said, Washington did not really get its head round this complexity and what it would entail. It just seemed to think it would be enough. Remove the Saddam regime, put in another one, that's it. We can go home. It's not that simple. On the contrary.
Yeah. And we in Britain, were we pushing for more soldiers at that time, immediately after the war?
We were not, because we had an adequate number in my judgment. We put in an adequate number, 35,000 off the top of my head, to cope with the maneuver war and then the immediate aftermath. It is true, we then brought the numbers down quite quickly, because we could not, in our army, sustain that deployment of 30,000 plus. No, it's a one-off.
It's a one-off.
Yeah.
Tell me, Afghanistan has had a lot of your attention and gets a lot of your attention in the book as well. And you said and implied that in some ways it could prove eventually to be strategically more important than Iraq. Why do you think that?
I think that because the genesis of the dreadful events of 9/11 seems to have come from Al-Qaeda's safe havens in southern Afghanistan. Those safe havens given by the Taliban regime at that time. And if we do not support, sustain and build Afghanistan into a better future, my fear, my almost certainty, is that without that international assistance, the Taliban would be back. They would overthrow President Karzai's government again. Al-Qaeda gets safe havens again. We're back to square one, if not worse. So I believe what we're doing in Afghanistan is vitally important for all, but starting most importantly with the Afghans themselves, who have come through several decades of a pretty miserable past. And we have made pledges, the international community has made pledges to Afghanistan to help it through into a better future and a stable future. And I believe we are getting there.
And you give Karzai, President Karzai, relatively high marks for his efforts.
He has a very difficult job. Afghanistan has never been an easy country to govern because of the nature of the terrain and the tribal structure of the Afghani people. But I do believe Afghan is fortunate to have him. He's now been president for, 5 years, I think. He is, of course, popularly elected by the people.
And his sheer survival, as well as his charms.
Long may that be so.
Yeah, long may that be so. Tell me, there was a report this week about Al-Qaeda suggesting that they have refurbished themselves and so on.
I've read it, yes.
Yeah, and as strong as ever, or maybe stronger or something. Do you think that Al-Qaeda is that much of a menace still?
It is difficult, and of course I've been out of office for a year. I don't get access to intelligence, David, obviously not. So I have to make my own judgments on open source material. But the International Institute of Strategic Studies, and IISS, who produced their report, are an extremely authoritative and highly respected organization. They will have written, I think, that report with great care, not in any way to be sensationalist, but as a proper academic report. I have no reason to disagree with IISS.
So that, what should we do about that?
Well,
what can we do about that?
Well, what we're doing, we have to redouble our efforts. Yes, of course, there is a military dimension, but it's only one dimension. In a way, this is a struggle not for terrain, although Al-Qaeda talk about imposing their rule on terrain. It's a battle for values, attitudes, tolerance, freedom of expression, all the qualities which we hold so dear in our own freedoms. That is the battleground. Rationality and reason against unreason and irrationality.
Can the military have influence as well, or only purely military influence?
Well, by their operations, provided that they're very careful, that they deal only with those who are true enemies, not with those who are caught up and who are innocent. That's very important. The influence is that Al-Qaeda will not prevail, and soldiers are dying to make sure that is the case on our behalf, on this nation's behalf, and indeed wider than that. And I think that carries its own influence as well. That we are prepared to stand on behalf of freedom, on behalf of Afghanistan.
And what about all the other things that you cover in your book? These are important current issues that you were very much intimately involved with. Of the rest of the things, the Balkans, Northern Ireland, the other assignments that you've had, what stands out most as a sense of adventure, pride, danger?
No, I think what stands out most is perhaps a more subtle point in terms of the use of force. Northern Ireland, for example, where I spent just over 7 years. The origin of the conflict in Northern Ireland was a political one, as conflict is, in that the two main groupings of people in Northern Ireland had no sense of shared identity, common future, or whatever. In fact, the contrary. Such a problem can only, at the end of the day, it seems to me, have a political outcome, a political settlement. It is the task of the police, the armed forces, the army in particular, where Northern Ireland was in, to hold the ring whilst this political process eventually took place. It took a long time before the settlement. But I think one of the extraordinary things, people have probably almost let it pass by. 2 months ago or so, the British Army went non-operational in Northern Ireland after 38 years. Extraordinary. Because we have achieved a political settlement which I very much hope will last into the indefinite future. But there's a lesson there, I think, that rather glib talk, defeat, victory, winning and losing, what do you mean by these terms? And I go back to where I was. Winning here is to achieve a settlement for people who are in conflict which will last. That may require military force, almost certainly will at some stage, but it also requires the politics to come right.
Well, it's a joy to talk about these things with you, Mike, and let's do it again, because
thank you.
Good luck. You don't need it with the book, but good luck with the book.
Very nice to have it anyway. Thanks so much.
Bless you. And in a moment, I'll be talking to former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto about the future for her country and the future for herself, too. Join us in a moment.